Y'all, I'm Jerry, about to check out what's better, first or second half of the Ruthless Aggression era. The Ruthless Aggression era, in my opinion, I have to say the second half, like the 05 on down to like maybe 2010, 11, 12, whatever it ended. Because that's when I first started watching wrestling, in like late 04 and early 05, when I started watching both Raw and SmackDown every week. I completely missed the first half of the Ruthless Aggression era, so the second half would definitely be my favorite and my pick during this whole video, man, because you had Batista and John Cena both at the top of the game. Triple H kind of in and out of the World Championship picture. Then he ultimately started teaming up with Shawn Michaels to reform DX, and they had their old little duo and like back and forth between wrestling and singles matches and stuff. And you had Edge becoming the rated R superstar. Yeah, Undertaker still there, becoming world champion once again. Mark Henry, everybody, man. Matt Hardy, Jeff Hardy, all them coming back. So let's hop into this video.
What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here. What's Better is back. It's been a very long time coming. I somewhat enjoyed this series, but felt like one of the videos were disappointing.
Wow.
I think one of those videos is probably the only one I truly hate on the channel. You'll be like, why did you keep it on here? Hey, we can't be hiding. It's a sign of progression coming from me. Anyways, these videos are straightforward. Compare two things and try to determine what's better. My opinion, of course. First half of Ruthless Aggression is from the very beginning all the way up to WrestleMania 21. Second half is from WrestleMania 21 up to July of 2008. That's how
2008 was the last year of the Ruthless Aggression era.
Use that template for this video. The Ruthless Aggression era was the era of change. You know, Rock and Austin left. New stars come in. We all know how it is. The era was much
but watching back
the typical Crash TV
on the network, when it was a network, and on Peacock now, I feel like I love the first half of the Ruthless Aggression era.
Well, 2002. It featured a lot of the same. You had KD, Vic, and HLA. So the more things changed,
and you had Brock Lesnar coming in. Undertaker was the undisputed champion at the time. Chris Jericho was the first ever undisputed champion.
The era wasn't really acknowledged much by WWE in the past, but something
so much
changed.
Stuff happened, man.
Nowadays it's remembered.
KD Vic storyline.
Somebody that's not me, they might say differently. Personal experience, I have a bunch of memories from the second half more so. Edge being the best heel on the planet.
Yeah.
Chavo Guerrero whacking Ray with a chair.
I remember that. They had that I Quit match on SmackDown.
There's just a bunch of memories from that time period.
I remember watching that on TV when I was like 9 years old.
The roster. In pro wrestling history, one of the things most remembered in eras is that time period's roster. The Golden Era was stacked as hell with a bunch of showmen, larger-than-life characters. The Attitude Era is often remembered for very outspoken guys. In the Ruthless Aggression era, well, in terms of WWE's
like
era, it's the most stacked roster. But here, we're comparing first and second half. The first half featured a who's who of wrestlers. At one point, WWE had Stone Cold, The Rock, Hulk Hogan, Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar, Kevin Nash, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and that's not all. You know, I don't want to be redundant. That's in the main event scene. In the mid-card, there was Chris Jericho, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Edge, Rey Mysterio, and that's without the new talent coming in like Batista and John Cena. Obviously, a couple of those guys left before 2005, but regardless, the first half was a little too stacked, especially during 2002 to 2003. This is, of course,
it was
in
at
part
different
due to
times,
the purchase of WCW and the inclusion of ECW wrestlers.
Yeah, Rhino, the Dudley Boys.
That much better. On the women's side, there was a few names such as
but they ended up splitting the Dudley Boys.
The tag teams from this time were pretty
Trish,
had the World Race Tag Team,
Lita, who else?
Evolution.
Stacey Keebler.
The tag division wasn't as good as the Attitude Eras, though, but compared to the second half, well, about to find out.
Billy and Chuck was a pretty good team.
When I say it's compared to the first
Tori Wilson, I forgot about Tori.
The second half is still a huge ensemble of talent. At this point, John Cena and Batista are at the helm, with guys like Edge and Randy Orton not too far behind. Brock Lesnar and a couple of others were missing. Add to that Eddie Guerrero, Chris Jericho, and Kurt Angle were no longer on the roster as time went on. The mid-card was certainly weaker as well in comparison to the very early days of
Bobby Lashley,
Ed Carlito, Chris Masters, Shelton Benjamin, Mr. Kennedy, those guys. Towards the very end, the mid-card expanded to include the likes of CM Punk and Jeff Hardy, but regardless, I think we know who wins this round. The tag teams were less memorable around here. You know, Eminem was cool. There was Crime Time.
We didn't have no good teams in the second half.
But there wasn't that level
I like Paul London and Brian Kendrick.
In the tag division compared to the first half. The women's side also took a huge hit with Trish Stratus and Lita's departure, but the likes of Candice Michelle, Mickie James, and Beth Phoenix rose to the occasion. Overall, when we look at the roster of each half, it's clear what wins. At one point, the WWE's roster was probably the most stacked it had ever been, and that certainly wasn't during the second half. It is hard to compare rosters that change ever so often, but when we look at the years collectively, 2002 to 2005 wins. It's a no-brainer. Matter of fact, WWE near the end of this era started struggling with star power due to a few injuries. The first half wins in the upper tier, mid-tier tag team, and of course the women's side. Next up, pay-per-views. I was initially going to compare both Raw and SmackDown of each half, but I figured that would be too hard. So here, look at which half had the better pay-per-views. Highlights of 02 to 05.
That had been SummerSlam 06 because I had that magazine.
Survivor Series 2002, WrestleMania 19, Vengeance 2003, Survivor Series. We could mention a lot more, but I think you guys get what I mean. Second half had Vengeance 2005, Survivor Series No Way Out, WrestleMania.
Survivor Series 05 was lit. That Raw and SmackDown match. I remember that storyline right there.
This one is the easiest choice in the video.
First time ever you had two world champions on the same team in the main event of every pay-per-view.
2002 to 2005 was just so much better. And if we're talking about which had the worst pay-per-views, it's the second half. The second half featured the legs from December to December. Add to that, a bunch of the shows were pretty average. 2002 alone, in the first year of the brand split, was so consistent and so damn good. The only time the second half in terms of pay-per-views was as consistent as that
classic match
stretch is, in my opinion, around the very end. You know, there wasn't that many bad pay-per-views from late 07 to mid-2008. And if you're wondering what I think the best pay-per-view is, well, it's WrestleMania 19. Moving on from the pay-per-views, I figured we'd talk about the storylines. As I said earlier, compared to the Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression was less outlandish, but that isn't saying much when you had Triple H effing a mannequin, Vince McMahon constantly talking about semen, Kurt Angle doing whatever the hell he was doing to look like he's won. What the hell's up with that? I say in this area, the worst of the worst is in the first half. You had Katie Vick, HLA, Al Wilson, and that's within the first year. 05 to 08 isn't clean of this, of course. There was a JR firing storyline, Ray and Chavo. Now, their matches were good, but the story certainly wasn't. Whole Eddie's in Hell thing. On the contrary, there's a bunch of great stories spread across the 6 years. There's Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle, SmackDown 6, the Evolution story when you look at it as a whole and what it did for Batista, Benoit's road to WrestleMania, Eddie's journey to No Way Out, the HBK and Triple H story. There's also some low-key underrated or overlooked mid-card feuds, such as Y2J and Christian, Trish and Victoria. Second half, more of the same. You had Matt Hardy and MVP's feud, which was absolute gold. I want to hear more people talk about this one. Brothers of the
That was an underrated feud.
Kennedy. And in the upwards here,
watching
the stuff
it back
everybody
then.
talks about, there's Edge and Cena, Batista and the Undertaker's transition.
Because they had like a one-upsmanship type tag team
feud, which intensified near the very end of the era. And for this one, I don't know if it's a hot take, but I'm going to go with the second half. My personal opinion is that a lot of the feuds just seemed much more iconic compared to the first half. It was honestly a very hard decision, and I went back and forth on it. One moment I'm thinking of Eddie and Angle, the next is the Age of Orin. And I'm just going to say it's a very narrow win. Add to that, it's odd how WWE had the most stacked roster ever, and a bunch of the stories in the first half fell flat. At the end of the day, we all love the stories from this era. A lot of them are still spoken about to this very day. The same could be said for the matches. See, WWE began focusing more on the in-ring product around 2002 and led to some ridiculous matches on a weekly basis, especially on SmackDown. A bunch of the guys were giving it 100% and made for some good television. When comparing each half, it's simple. What side had more iconic matches? Often when watching something from this era of WWE, I tend to notice that around the era of Batista and John Cena, there was less great TV matches often. Even the pay-per-views were somewhat weaker in that area.
Say first half had the best matches. Better matches.
Must-watch matches. Let's say randomly, December 2003. That month featured Brock Lesnar and Chris Benoit in Epic Thriller, and the following week it was a match with Rey Mysterio. And to close out the year, HBK and The Game had one of the greatest matches in Raw history, and those aren't good matches. They're matches that are really special. If we list a random month from the second half, like say February 2007, there's not much other than a good tag match between these four. It also helps that the first half had workhorses like Kurt Angle.
Then you had Undertaker
Angle was gone.
Batista's rivalry.
And there's a couple of reasons as to why the wrestling wasn't as good as it was in the second half. Come to think about it, I also remember there was this report from 2004. They revealed that WWE wanted their wrestlers to ease up on the intensity. Wanted the action to be a bit slow and more meaningful, and here's something I found out. Maybe that played a part. But anyways, looking at a bunch of great matches, it has to be the first half. There's just a better collection there. And with regards to 05-08, there's less of a collection there. Like, the great matches weren't happening so often. Sure, a bunch of them were good, but the consistency... And also helps that the first half was full of superb TV matches. Sometimes in the same week, Eddie Bro would have a great performance. On the other side, Evolution have an epic tag team match. Easy win for the first half. 3-1 at this point. I don't think we're going to have a worse situation here. Unlike us, who always be talking about storylines and matches from the Ruthless Aggression era, WWE loves the moments even more so. The 2000s featured a plethora of moments. Brock Lesnar shooting star for good or for bad, HBK's comeback and his world title win, Batista turning on Evolution, and that's just the first half. Second featured the reforming of DX.
Batista turning on Evolution made me become a fan that night.
Ray, WrestleMania 22. There's just so many. But if we were to choose one, it's the first one for me. We all know the type of things WWE replays from the 2000s. It's always John Cena debuting, Brock winning the title, Evolution forming, and one
every time.
Perspective. The moments of the first half were just much more iconic. You had Jeff Hardy desperately reaching for the title to make something of himself, Eric Bischoff shocking the world and appearing on WWE programming, Rock finally overcoming and dropping Stone Cold for the count, Goldberg's debut, Brock and Big Show breaking the ring, and of course there's Eddie and Benoit. That moment made me take.
They don't show that part no more.
From that time's perspective, it just might be the greatest moment from this era. This is without the random moments everybody talks about to this very day, such as the Rock concert or Shane McMahon getting his balls electrocuted.
I remember that.
That ain't good, but it's certainly memorable. Before we look at the time as a whole, let's try to talk about the best stretch. Like the time period in this era where the shows, the pay-per-views were at their most consistent. This is where I struggled the most while making this video. It's very hard to say, but I found an answer. Like at one point, SmackDown was on fire while Raw had a cloud over it. And on the other side of things, Raw was great and SmackDown was kind of weird. But if I go with something, I'd say from Vengeance of 2002 all the way up to WrestleMania 19. Sure, Triple H was doing some weird stuff, and sure, some stories bombed. But there's good to be had on both shows. Like when people talk about Raw 2002 or 2003, they make it seem like it's 0 out of 10. And that's not the case. The mid-card on Monday nights was pretty consistent. You had guys like Rock and Stone Cold having a final run. It wasn't all bad. And SmackDown, what's there to say? They were on a roll with those superb matches. Brock Lesnar is destroying any and everybody in sight regardless of size. And it's an easy answer to me. So our tally ends 5-1. I honestly thought it'd be closer and I desperately scrambled for a tiebreaker. Turns out I was wrong. At the end of the day, this is just my perspective, and to be honest, I prefer the second half more so than the first, regardless of the video. But as we see here, I feel the first beats it in nearly every area. Overall, Ruthless Aggression is finally remembered, for good and for bad. And this was a very interesting topic to me, because you can notice the huge differences in each half. The way the shows were written, the matches themselves, and of course the entire roster. In making this video, it takes me back to that time where I was so invested in the matches and the stories. And I lived for wrestling at the time. Like, it didn't matter if it was toys, shirts, TVs, games, everything. I had so much memorabilia or merch. When thinking about it, most of the stuff I had as a kid came from the Ruthless Aggression era in general. I felt like this time around I did a better job with who or what's better. And something was bugging me about the RVD and Jeff Hardy video that I stopped doing it altogether. Other than that Shawn Michaels video, of course, but yeah, I thought it was a nice return. But anyways, I think the first half of Ruthless Aggression is better than the second half. It's as simple as that, and I know a bunch of you agree with me. Do you? Please comment down below. And that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the F5 on the like button, and perhaps the Batista bomb on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out. What is up, guys?
Hi, y'all. This is a great video, man. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I pretty much grew up on during the second half of the Ruthless Aggression era, and that's why it's my favorite part of. I prefer the second half rather than the first half because I completely missed the first half growing up. But looking back on it, the first half definitely had the most memorable moments because all you see now, whenever they play back to somebody returning or some like a special show or something, they always go back to moments from back then, from the early 2000s, like when John Cena came back, when Undertaker won the Royal Rumble, like things like that. So it was always stuff that comes from that part of the first half. But the second half, you had, man, Batista winning the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 21, John Cena winning the WWE Championship at the same pay-per-view at WrestleMania that year too as well. You had JBL becoming WWE champion and having the longest running reign in SmackDown history before it was broken by AJ Styles during that time. You had Rey Mysterio winning the World Heavyweight Championship and winning the Royal Rumble that year, 06. Randy Orton becoming the Legend Killer, then becoming the Viper. You had Edge becoming the Rated R Superstar and cashing in on John Cena. Cashing in twice, becoming the first superstar ever to cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase twice. You had Jeff Hardy finally become WWE champion after all that time. RVD became WWE champion in 2006, and ECW kind of revived this pay-per-view. No matter how bad the show was, and people didn't like that version, the WWE's version of ECW, they still became part of the second half of the Ruthless Aggression era. So let me know what y'all prefer. If y'all prefer the first half or the second half of the Ruthless Aggression era. Like, comment, subscribe, and then I'll see you next time. Peace.